awesome.
Awesome. That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No,
You're awesome. You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I'm your host, Kevin, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And I know in a few minutes here you're going to be listening to an episode of this podcast where I say we're not doing post intros and outros anymore. And, well, what do you know? We are. And that's because this episode that you're listening to was recorded way back in about 2019, I believe. And we're finally getting to around posting it. And I think I confused words. Forgive me. I'm getting this out a little bit later than I wanted to. Forgive me. I am preparing for a 3-week vacation. So these episodes are coming out a little bit later than I wanted to. But we're getting this one out. And then in a few days, we'll get the 2023 episode out, 181, where we were doing a panel at Fan Expo Philadelphia. And that will get us caught up. And while I'm on vacation, everything should be in line with where we're at. But this was a great conversation I had with the one, the only Aaron Catano-Saez from All My Fantasy Children. He's also a voice actor and just an all-around good dude. So without further ado, because I kind of blow him up in the actual intro of the show, let's get right to it. Here it is. Jump in your time machine with me. Get that flux capacitor fluxing. We're going to go talk to Aaron Catano-Saez way back in 2019. Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. That's right. The pre-intro is back. Future Kev is kicked to the curb for at least the first half of the show before he comes for the mid-roll or the end of the show. Who knows where he's going to come in. But this week, we're sitting down to chat with someone whose laughter I think is infectious. Someone who, when you listen to his podcast, he represents, I think, the audience. Though, as I've gotten further along in the show, it's actually like it's amazing how the script has almost been flipped a little bit. I think I'm not going to bury the lead anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, from All My Fantasy Children, please welcome to the show, Mr. Aaron Catano-Saez.
What up? Hello, everybody. How's it going?
I feel like this intro thing that I do, like it's I love doing it because like it kind of gives me an opportunity to like build up the guest and whatnot. But like, A, everyone knows by the title of the show, and B, we're not live. So like I'm building it up for me and you. That's it.
Hey, building up the hype is what podcasting is all about.
Yes. And sometimes you're your own cheerleader, and you need. Oh, there's you and I were talking off air about the box that blew away, and I see it 3 houses down.
Oh no!
Yep.
The box that blew away is the latest prompt this week. So, Kevin, what do you have about the box that blew away?
We need to roll some tables. I'll tell you we're gonna like kind of hop right into it, and then we'll just like this show normally is. We'll hop around. This isn't a linear show. So I'm about. Let's see. Let me check I was listening to it this morning. I'm on episode 70, about 30 minutes into episode 70 of
Jesus
All My
Christ.
Fantasy Children.
Oh my God.
Now, to peel back the curtain a little bit, the last time you and I spoke, I was on episode 56, which was it even a week ago? I guess it was about a week ago.
No, yeah, it was like a week ago. That is nuts.
So
70. Which one is 70?
70 is Tom the Tongue Thompson.
Oh, sweet God, I am so sorry. Oh my God.
I think I love it. Much like there's not one episode, like the episodes that you guys go on and say, guys, like you're halfway through, guys, we're sorry, this is awful, but we're doing this. There are a lot of times my favorite episodes.
Oh God, no, ones where we say like, I'm sorry, this was a mistake, this is the worst. They're always like the what I refer to as like the dumb ones. And I hold a place for. Have you gotten to Jeremiah Noodleman?
Yes. Oh my God.
Jeremiah Noodleman is quite possibly the dumbest thing we've ever discussed, but it is Tom the Tongue Thompson might top that because we talk about fantasy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But Jeremiah Noodleman for anyone listening who hasn't heard it, is about a sentient crock pot with big beefy legs that like kind of shows up to towns like the Kool-Aid Man to throw a party for teens that is not cool because they only play jock jams.
And my only regret is not listening to that episode sooner so that I could celebrate on, I guess if you go by the date that you guys dropped in the episode, it was January 23rd. I think the episode dropped on the 26th. So there's room for interpretation. I guess it's just a 3-day festival of celebration of Jeremiah Noodleman.
It is important to give thanks to the crock pot that, that brings the noise, brings the jams.
I certainly I pray to God. I think I may have even added it to my calendar. I'm not sure. If not, I will after this episode. But 2020, I am celebrating Noodleman Day for sure.
Oh boy, I cannot fucking wait. We're gonna throw a party for sure.
I think I went ahead. Yeah. So that was you guys did that January of 2018. So I just looked at the titles and I was a little disappointed that there was, unless you guys do it like as like a just a quick callback in the January 2019 episode.
No. we kind of forget everything.
That's fine. I will remember for 2020. And there will be a special Everything is Awesome episode in which we celebrate.
I think we're recording later today, so we're going to have to talk about this because I have completely forgotten about Jeremiah Noodleman Day.
That was one of my favorite episodes. They're just awesome. So, all right, since we're talking about it, for those that are listening that may not know what All My Fantasy Children is, please give your pitch, not Jeff's pitch. I want to hear your pitch.
So I know not Jeff's pitch is a very good phrase because Jeff wrote. I almost started saying Jeff's pitch. So All My Fantasy Children is a character creation, world building, and storytelling podcast. Me and Jeff Stormer, host of Party of One Pod, and Talking Nog. Every week we take a listener submitted prompt from like Twitter or Google or a website, and we create an original fantasy character and like create their backstory using tabletop games and character creation tools like books and resources like that. And we craft like an original world, and kind of we figured out that you can create a world and world build by character creation, and the fun that happens when you do that, and you kind of have when you throw any kind of standards or rule book out the window, the fun that you can have making a world that's like stupid but also serious, and having the freedom to do that through character creation is kind of what All My Fantasy Children is. Like, it's anywhere from talking about like Jeremiah Noodleman and his role in the world, because Jeremiah Noodleman has like a role in this world, but it's like a fucking sentient pot. Or we can talk about like, Dusk Seabreeze, this like elf who lives below the surface of the earth, locking away timelines with a thing called the Shadowbinder. Like, it's all, it's pretty much like complete collaborative story building with complete creative freedom. And it's my jam. It's my favorite thing in the world. And it's just my favorite thing to do every week. Yeah,
it is a blast to listen to. It is it is one of those shows that I happen to be, since I've started binging this show, I happen to be in a good place mentally, but it is one of those shows that remind me of the Star Wars campaign podcast, where I can, like, when I was down and out, I just listened to that to smile and whatnot. And this is it's a show because at its heart, two best friends sitting around talking, which is my favorite type of show. And then you have the world building. It's just very funny, very, it's very improv and
it's completely improv with like very little, like, it'll pretty much be like we pick a prompt and then like 15 minutes before write an episode, or if like we have an idea that's that fucking good, like, all right, I thought of this yet, but then the rule is you have to spring it on the other person.
Oh, okay.
Like, I can write as much as I want in like a notebook or whatever, but you can't tell the other person. Okay. You have to spring it on them. You go like, so I have like the latest episode, I wrote a bunch of stuff and was like, what do you think of this? And only like 2 pieces of it actually stayed.
Oh wow, okay.
So that's like the rule of like, if you're going to write something or premeditate things, like they're probably going to get chucked because you have to pitch them to the other person.
Yeah.
That's I love it so much.
So let's, because this is maybe something I don't know after just talking to you guys so much about the show is, so the process seems to maybe differ a little bit week to week depending on if you guys just ran. So do you guys sometimes randomly like day of pick your prompt, and then other times
we always do, yeah.
And then other times you have something like, listen, we picked this yesterday and I have a lot of thoughts. That's why I want to record about it.
So how it works, like we're recording probably in the evening tonight. I haven't even looked at fucking prompts.
Okay.
I have absolutely no idea. But if I do, it's like 10 minutes before and I'm like, what do you think of this? And I just send it to him and he's like, yeah, sure. Or like, nah, we can find another one. Or if I was like, I've been thinking about this concept, I want to talk about it in an episode. That's all we'll say. And then we pick a prompt and try to fit that in, like if we want.
Gotcha.
So it'll be like the latest one. It was, I had messaged him. I was like, I want to talk about Callahan Whiskerman from episode 14.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I want to like talk about who I think this person was. And then I'm like, okay, so what do you think of this prompt? And it's fantasy's most prolific gambler. And I'm like, and then in the episode, we're like, okay, how do we mix these things together? But we make sure we do that on mic.
Okay.
So you hear that it's like a process of like 2 people actually work. Like we try not to cut out the work part.
Right.
Like we never want to seem like what we call magic podcast people, where it's like, how did you think of that? When it's like, well, they didn't. They wrote it beforehand.
Yeah.
We try to keep like the moments where like our heads in our hands and we're like, oh my God, I have no fucking ideas. Okay, what if we use Table Fables, a book resource, because we are tapped? Like that will always be a part of the show because that's like honest. And I hate when people try to act like they're fucking actually wizards.
Right.
When it's like, oh my God, I just had the greatest idea. It's this novel. And you're like, no, that's keep the work in there. That's why I like tabletop shows. Like when you hear them go like, I don't know what to do. And the GM is like, well, don't forget that your character can do this. And they're like, oh my God, because that's what like actual, playing games is like.
Right. It's amazing how like a lot of these actual play podcasts don't sound like like how you actually play at the table.
And that's okay because that's like a stylized thing. And like I get that. Like when they're produced and they feel like a performance.
Oh yeah, and
like that's one thing. And then I'm always like, and that's great. I love those when I'm like, wow, it feels like I'm listening to like an old-fashioned radio play. But sometimes I do like hearing that how satisfying is the sound when you hear someone go like, hold on.
Yeah,
and they're looking through like their character sheet. You're like, that's me. Like it's very a humanizing moment,
right.
In listening to that.
Because I listen to both types. I listen to the ones that are very well produced, and they're the ones that tend to be like the soul music, or for lack of a better term, that sometimes I need to just like forget life for an hour. And then the ones that leave that stuff in, it's just nice because like you said, it's humanizing. And I feel like they probably still have to edit some of that out because I can't imagine like leaving it all in, because there has to be a fine balance of leaving like, all right, let's take 5 minutes to look this up. Let's take 5 minutes to look this up. But like hearing the dice roll, hearing the, I don't know, and maybe hearing the flipping of a character sheet real quick. And yeah, that stuff all kind of like just, okay, yeah, these people are just like me. They don't seem superhuman or super like I have an imposter syndrome a lot when it comes to podcasting or being funny in general. So when that humanizing stuff's in, it's like, they're just like me. Like they need to like think stuff too.
Exactly. It's a for me and like how our show works, it's an important part of the whole process where it's like anyone can fucking do this. You know what I mean? Because an important part of our show is like you bring what you know. I don't claim to know a ton of tabletop games, but I have a lot of ideas and I've watched so much anime. I have a huge video game background in that regard, and I try to bring that instead of like pretending to be some kind of like tabletop scholar. And like Jeff knows a ton about tabletop games and anime and video games, but there's some things where he does not, you play to your strengths, and it's an important thing to know what they are and enjoy them and enjoy your collaborators' strengths and, build those up, as opposed to like, and that's why the imposter syndrome thing, it's because like I come from like this theater background where they're like, you just gotta fucking survive with what you got, in theater, because it's so fucking hard and it's so much about who you are and what you bring, that I luckily have that mentality and podcasting where it's like, this is what I got.
Mhm.
I can't manufacture a tool set that I do not have. And that's okay. That's what gives me strengths. Like my power is the fact that like I come at this show without a preconceived notion of like what tabletop and fantasy has to be. And that lets me twist and turn things in ways that they're normally not, while still maintaining like some sort of like, with a strong structure of like storytelling.
Right.
Like I don't, and I think you can find a lot of freedoms and things that are sometimes felt as like, oh, these are my weaknesses, or like, this is where I lack. And it's like, well, that lack is actually like, could be a freedom if you have collaborators that are able to, balance you out or like lift you up in that regard. So it's never like, I always feel so, I hate, not that I hate the term, I completely understand like the imposter syndrome, because I have it too in a lot of different ways. But I always just want people to know that it's just like, you feel like you don't belong here. You're not this enough. You're not that enough. You're not this enough. And I don't want to seem like a fucking corny tweet of like, you can do anything you want. But like, it's this shitty feeling of like, you don't belong in a space because you don't feel like qualified enough, or like an expert enough, or like your execution isn't as good as so-and-so's. But it's usually based on shitty comparisons to other people.
Yeah.
When it should be known that like what you bring, just you, is unique because of who you are, your life experiences, and what that has like a tremendous value in terms of like a literal value, where I love the fact that I bring up like a deep cut fucking anime reference, and Jeff is this like, or a Final Fantasy reference, and Jeff sometimes be like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like what I know.
Right.
And it's this, and then those two meet in the middle, and it makes this cool like monster child story based on our strengths. And I take a second to just encourage people, if you're feeling like a fucking imposter, like you don't fucking belong, like make those strengths like your fucking weakness, or these shortcomings that you think you have, know that that's just a freedom for you to like learn. It's like if you were to walk into like an empty warehouse, it's like potential, kind of like you have the potential to fill it.
It's I'm gonna work this Kevin Smith reference in because that's what we do here at Everything Is Awesome. He something that I've really kind of gravitated towards over the last I've been doing this show for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years, is like just being positive. So like the first like 8 years of me podcasting was me trying to figure out how to make a buck at it. And it like, I didn't realize how much I actually hated podcasting back then, because like I thought like, oh yeah, I really love this medium. I really love talking to a mic and really love sitting around with friends and talking and whatnot. And then I took like a year off or whatever because I had kids. And then when I started back up again, started doing this format, because it's really easy to sit down with one other person and have like kind of that like new co-host every week / like new best friend every week to sit around and chat about whatever we want to talk with. And I was like, I'm not going to worry about like anything. And that's when I was like really deep in my lore of Kevin Smith. And like, he was really kind of getting deep 3 years ago, like really kind of pushing forward with his podcasting, like live shows and stuff like that. And like his message was like, just, you know what, everyone can do this. Like everyone can have a story. Everyone has a story. And like, that is like how I've been trying to live my life for the last 3 years. So like, while I am not by any stretch of the imagination really strong in tabletop on any level, I really enjoy listening to that stuff. I really enjoy trying to create in that world. I have with Jeff's doing that pro wrestling Game Slam 2019 thing, and
Hell
like
yeah.
I wasn't going to force myself into doing it, because I feel like forcing yourself into creating something is just bad news. But like the right things aligned for me to come up with an idea, and I was like, I'm going to fucking do it. and like
Good.
I have no real like strength in game design, but like, hey, I got this idea, this little idea that I want to kind of see what goes with, and I've been running with it, and so like it's while I'll always have the imposter, I think it's hard for creative people to not have that imposter syndrome at times.
It's hard for everybody, I think, not to have it, especially when you have access via the internet to looking at other people's lives, like, and seeing successes of other people. It's hard not to compare yourself and get a little envious, and then you start looking inward and going like, well, where am I at? Do I even belong here? It's super easy, and that's the shitty part of having access to fucking anybody.
But I think the important thing is, like, you know, for me, and I think anyone that feels that way and doesn't know how to kind of get out of it is just do it anyway. Like, do that thing anyway, or find a way to do that thing, or find something that's maybe adjacent to that thing. And I think you'll feel good. Like, I don't know, like, I don't feel bad. Like, I don't feel like dumb. I don't feel anything about like going into this game design thing, because like luckily it's a subject that I know. Like, I know wrestling, and like I found a thing that works. And while like I know it's not going to be as good as, say, something that like I'm using Jeff because he's just the first game designer that comes to mind. It might not be something as good as Jeff would do, but like that's not my end game. My end game is like, hey, you know what? In the beginning of the year, I said I want to design a game this year, 2019. I want to design a game and like finish a script. They're the two things that I want to try to get done this year. So like, it's kind of like, I guess, like, to battle my imposter syndrome, as I just kind of make, all right, listen, I'm going to do this thing no matter what. I'm going to give myself the year to do it, and then I'm gonna, and just get it done, and then see what happens.
Hell yeah. And it's not so much about like, you know, making something as good as somebody else's, because it will be good. It will be because it's yours, you know, and like no one, unless you're trying to be somebody else, you will always make good shit because it's coming from you. Like, there's a line from a musical by Stephen Sondheim where someone's like, basically like their great grandmother's visiting them, whatever, and it's like a struggling artist, and she says, anything you do, let it come from you, then it will be new. Because like, if you make something, it is therefore new and unique and original, if you're not trying to be someone else or force something to be. And that's it's a big reason why, like, I didn't have a fucking podcasting background. I don't even play fucking a lot of tabletop games. But I was like, I want to make a show where like we use tabletop games to tell like really cool stories, because that's the part of tabletop that I like. I don't give a shit about rules and, you know, rule books and stuff. They're great. I like the character creation and like hearing who people come up with, because it's such a cool part of when you meet someone who plays games and you're like, well, what are your characters like? And they have this amazing story. It's such a peek into their inner self. And like, you know, it's a moment that people can really let their hair down and go wild and like play. And it's, you know, I have, for, you know, in a lot of people's opinion, no place making a podcast about tabletop games, as I do not fucking play them or design them, or, you know, I don't have a podcast show where it's like, you know, a sweaty show where we dive down the rabbit hole of rule books and we, you know, and I join Aaron as he sits behind a cardboard wall. Like, no, I don't fucking do that. And that's okay. I don't give a shit. Our stories are bomb because they're Jeff and I. They're, you know, they're the stories of friends who, you know, who bring so much of ourselves and our own lives and our own hometown. This isn't me fucking bragging. It's just something I feel strongly about, where like, I know our show is good and unique because Jeff and I bring our own lives and selves and towns and like passions to this show. So I don't care if people don't like it sometimes. I'm like, I know that story is fire because that's the story of like my grandfather losing his memory. And like, so I don't give a shit if somebody's like, no, I didn't really care for it. I'm like, I don't care. I know it was bomb and it made me feel good telling the story. And that's all I give a shit about. You know, I know that shit was banging.
And that's like, you know, throwing another Kevin Smith reference out there is like, he's, you know, whether you're a fan of his work or not, like the one thing, especially like now in his like second half of his career, basically, where he's like making movies like Tusk and Yoga Hosers and stuff like that, where people aren't really like, his audience is like, man, what happened to Kevin Smith? You're making these off the wall movies that are not like, I don't like them. And like, his goal with every single one of his movies was to make something that he wanted to watch. And like that's something that I take while also battling the fact that I don't want to be a Kevin Smith. I want to be a Kevin Gallagher. Battling that like fine line of like kind of, listening to this guy's advice, but also kind of forging my own path. Is like, I love the fact, like you listen, Yoga is just not a great movie, but I went and watched it and smiled the whole time because I can find entertainment in almost anything. But B, like that's a movie that like, I don't know how the hell he did it, but like it proves that you can literally make anything. Like if you have this stupid idea that you want to make into a movie, you can find a way to do it. Like no, like the only thing that's going to stop you is yourself from like not doing the work to get there.
It's true. And like, I was just talking to Jeff about this because like there's a lot of things that get in the way of creativity in 2019. And it's like, fucking being tired, working, life. And I get that. That fucking sucks. But like, that's pretty much it. It's just like, it fucking sucks. But like, you'll find a way. Like, you know what I mean? For me, it's always been, like when it's hard, things are hard. I just go like, well, I can't work right now. I can't be creative. And like you take time away until you can be. It's not going to go anywhere. And that's unfortunately the state of like the mentality of being a creative person in 2019 is the fucking grind where it's like, oh, if you're not working, what are you doing? You're falling behind and shit like that. And that sucks because like sometimes you have to step back and like you got to fucking live. You know what I mean? Like you have to feed yourself and shit. And sometimes that's fucking hard. So it's knowing that it's allowing people to see that and give people permission to be like, yo, take care of your shit first. Like podcasting and your creativity is not going to go away if you take 3 months off to start a fucking job and like start working and get some traction under you so that you can sit at your desk, not stress about making fucking rent or eating, and then really like dive into your shit. There's no need to be like a tortured fucking artist. Like, no, it's all like a very shitty mentality. So it's like, I'm like, there is like, that's when I say like, you're so right. Where like nothing gets in your way of being creative. Like nothing can stop you because like those aren't stoppages. Those aren't roadblocks. That's just reality. The reality of being a person is like, sometimes you got to prioritize. So like nothing can stop you from making the projects that you want to make because taking a break and not working on a project isn't stopping. It's this, like for me in theater, it's always been like this poisonous mentality where they're like, well, you have an audition in 6 months. Can you really call yourself an actor anymore? And you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, that's so mean. Or when people, it's like, oh, you always hear people talk about actors like, guys have fucking worked in 10 years. And you're like, yeah, that's fucking a lot for this person mentally. Like, that's a lot. Don't shit on them. You don't know their life. They might be like taking care of people or like handling other business. And I just always want to encourage this fucking mentality of, prioritizing, like your life always comes first, whether it's, you have the time and you can bust out these amazing projects and feel good about them, or it's like fucking working and, experiencing the things that life have to offer that aren't creative, endeavors. And it's fucking hard. And that's reality. But like the good part is you can always find people anymore. It's a little easier to find people who will be your fucking like support and strength when you feel low. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like working with Jeff is the fucking greatest shit ever. Because when we both were starting new jobs, I was like, Jeff, like I'm fucking training at this restaurant like 4 nights a week, getting home at like 1 a.m. I don't know how the fuck I'm going to make any of these episodes. And he's like, you release them when you release them. Like, fuck, like, don't worry about that. Like, get your shit done. Like, man, we got to live. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so fucking right. Like, I feel better. And that's kind of the thing that we try to push anymore of like, that's why I say like, we're not magic podcasting people. Like, y'all, you get the episode when you get it. I released 2 last week because I was like, I had the time, banged them out. Here you go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like every Friday, no matter. I'm not a fucking, rather snow nor sleet nor, that kind of fucking, no, it's like you get it when you get it. I'll be the first one to say like, listen, if you have like a thing you want to do, like if you can find like that 15 minutes and in your day and work on it. But like also if you need to like take time off and like
not do a thing for a couple weeks or months or whatever. Like because I'm the king. I for 9 months out of the year, I'm pretty good about finding an hour or two a day to work on whatever I want to work on, whether it's podcasting, editing a podcast, writing, whatever it is. And then there's like 3 months of the year where like, it's okay. This is like, I know that this next month is going to be, I'm going to start slowing down at work because it's going to be like, it's the anniversary of my uncle's passing, so like I have to gear up for that. And then the month where my uncle passed away, I just kind of stopped working. And then the next month is his birthday and Christmas, so like I just know that for the last 3 months of the year I'm pretty much shit. So like I know whenever I talk to people, it's like, listen, man, like I'll tell you, like work, like the only way it's going to get done is if you find 15 minutes, a day or whatever. But like also, if you mentally can't handle it, like if you need, like we just said, if you need to take the break, take the break. It's very important because you're never going to get anything done if you're forcing yourself to do the work and you can't eat or you can't live or simply you just can't like wake up. Like you're it doesn't even have to be like a limitation of, oh, I financially can't live. It can be like, oh, I mentally can't handle life today. And don't force yourself to work through that. Like that should just be like, today we're recording on a bright sunny Monday because like I finally had a day that I could take for my day gig and just take a mental day from the last 3-4 weeks of like torture. And I'm so happy that like, A, I have a job that allows me to kind of take a sick day whenever I want, but B, like, I knew I needed a mental day. And like, while I'm still doing something creative, this is what I want to do. Like, this is how I want to spend my mental day is not worrying about the day gig.
Yes. And like the work suffers when you're trying to force a thing to be like, you're not going to make anything good if you're at like fucking 10% batteries. Like just let it go to 100%, like, and then make it, or be at 50, whatever. Just there's never this. But people like I struggle with this constantly where I'm like, but if I'm not doing this, someone else is, and they're getting ahead of me in this fucking race. And it's like, it's not a fucking race. Oh my God, get that out of your head. But like, it's just easy to fall into these traps, but there's ways around it. And it's kind of by talking about it and making people feel more comfortable with like taking a fucking day away from it or a month away or a year away for it, or putting it down forever, putting it in a box, wrapping it up and putting it in your closet, and you go like, I'll take that out when it's ready. When I'm ready to go and open that box, it's there for me. It's not going anywhere, and then when I'm ready to open it up, I will. But until then, I'm leaving it in the fucking closet.
Like there is, I quite literally have a box with my wrestling boots and my wrestling outfit and all my wrestling gear in it. And like, will that ever be open again? I mean, probably not to actually wrestle. I at 30, I'll be 35 this year. At 35, I think those days of like getting hit in the head with chairs and taking bumps, those days are probably over. But like, I still have it. Like, if I ever wanted to, I could go to the gym and I could like get back in cardio shape, and I could open up that box and lace up those boots again if I really, really wanted to. But like, I know that like I'm not only not physically ready, I'm not mentally ready to ever hop back in the ring, at least I shouldn't say ever again, but like realistically ever again.
Yeah, and if that's the case, that's whatever, there's more important stuff to kind of think about.
And that's the thing, like if you put something down or you put something away, like there's a reason for it, and then you'll find the next thing that you want to do. It kind of goes back to me finding like a way to design a game. Like I didn't force myself into it. I said, okay, a wrestling game. That's like I really would love to be part of this, but I don't want to do it. And I mean, it was honestly listening to an episode of All My Fantasy Children that I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is how I do the game. And I just went down that rabbit hole, and it turned into a thing. And I've been going back and forth with my buddy about it. Like, hey, like, how does this sound? Blah, blah, blah. And like, so it's just let the inspiration hit you. And one of the things that I think is I always try, whenever I see it on Twitter, I always try to retweet it at the bare minimum. And if not, like retweet, quote it. When people say like, I was 37 when I wrote my first manuscript, and I was 45 when I had my first published novel, or like Tim Miller, he was 50 some years old when he directed his first feature film, Deadpool, so it's quite, I mean, I guess when it's your time and you pass on, I guess is the only time it's too late. But that shouldn't be any kind of, roadblock you put up for yourself. Like, it's literally never too late to start anything. Like, who says you can't, start playing tabletop games or start a podcast or start writing when you're 50, 60 years old?
Yeah, the idea that there's a time limit on things, and like if you're not this by the time you're this, then you are a fail. You're
Right.
doing poorly, and it's unfortunately all too common to hear things like that. Like I used to think like that, where I'm like, well, if I'm not on Broadway by 35, I might as well hang up my cleats and not, you know what I mean? But like, it's just priorities change, and my mom would always tell me like what you want when you're 20 isn't the same as you want when you're 30, and what you want when you're 40 it'll change too, and then 50 and 60, like everything is kind of temporary anyway, so it's better not to think about that stuff and kind of just enjoy the ride. But really, like, you kind of just take things as they come and enjoy the process of everything. Like All My Fantasy Children is not like some profit god, like where I can work free, like I can work from home and my bills are taken care of, but like it is genuinely the thing that brings me just the most joy making, and like I love that about it. It's just, that's all it is right now. Is to me, it's the most creatively satisfying thing I have ever worked on, and I love it for that. And it's my favorite thing to work on every single week or think about every day. And that's okay.
And I think it's important to have, even if you have multiple things going, it's important to have that, at least that one thing that like you just are like, this is the thing I love, and it's like, so it means so much to me, and it's like I don't care. Like that was the biggest eye opener for me, because like I say podcasting in general is like that's the medium that I just truly love, and the community that I feel I'm part of, and it's like I said earlier in the show, the first 8 years of me podcasting was me trying to figure out how to make a buck off of it. And I since starting Everything Is Awesome in 2016, it was about like, hey, let me just have a good time. Let me have fun podcasting. And like, it turned into like, while this show is definitely not the most successful thing I've ever done, I've definitely done things that have had a lot more downloads, a lot more live views and stuff like that. That doesn't matter to me. Like, I have fun sitting here and chatting. This week I'm chatting with Aaron. Next week I'll be chatting with whoever, and I've sat down and I've chatted with literally my best friends, and I've sat down and talked to strangers, and whether they are people of note or not, like, it's just fun for me to sit down and have like kind of a controlled conversation where like, hey, I know we're going to sit down and talk for an hour, and it could be about your podcast for the entire time, or it could be about Batman. Like, who knows what we're going to talk about, but it's just the most like fun I have, podcasting now is the stuff that just makes me smile, and I don't have to worry about, oh, let's see, I had 20 downloads last week, let's hope I have 25 this. Like, who cares about
chasing numbers it's easy to do, though. That's the problem. It's easy to chase numbers, especially when people share them very openly, who have gigantic audiences. Once again, it comes back to the comparison part, where you go like, well, you think of yourself like, well, where am I at, in that regard? Where am I at compared to that? And you're like, that's their fucking, I hate the phrase, like, that's their journey. But like, it's true. We're like, that's got nothing to do with me. That's their shit. And I need to accept the fact that I am not, that's not me, and it'll never be a part of me. But it is easy to, once again, fall into pit holes and potholes and stuff.
I like, one of the conversations I love having with like people that want to start a podcast is like, listen, start one. Absolutely. Like, if you have an idea, you should start one. And like, the only negative I have to say to it is that like sometimes it costs money. Like, other than that, it's a very expensive hobby. But other than that, like, here's like expectations. Like, don't be Mark Maron, don't be Kevin Smith or Adam Carolla. Like, you're not going to get those numbers. Like, no one gets those numbers unless you already have that. If you're that personality that has an established fan base of that many million people. I was like, it's the fun numbers that I've read is like the average podcast gets 150 at tops a week downloaded. So like that's like a very small goal that like, even if you don't even have to worry about hitting that. But like, that's just like, if you're looking for a realistic number, like 150 people are going to download your show, and that's fine. And the way I look at it is like, I'm happy when like I go do a live show, and like if one person shows up, okay, like I'm there for me more than anybody else, and that's what you should be doing a podcast for, is for yourself. And like I say, listen, if you're gonna do it, like here's other like commit yourself to 10 episodes, because then you'll know if you love it or not, because 50% of the podcasts that hit 10 episodes don't go past that. So it's like, just if you can make it to 10, if you can make it to 25 or 50, like that's all success. Like if you need to find the ways to smile, like, and if you want to look at numbers for whatever reason, you need to like realize that not everyone hits 10 episodes. A lot of people bail out after 2 episodes. So like those little things are success, and look at those little successes, and they all add up to what I think is just like,
it's true.
Whether they're brand successes or huge successes or just your personal, like for me, it's just all personal success. Like, hey, I hit episode 150, or I'm probably going to be hitting episode 200 by July, like those are like, hey man, like I've never done a podcast that's gone past 167 episodes. So like when I get around to 168, that's a success for me. Like that's going to be awesome. So I think it's very important to not worry about the numbers and just set up little milestones for yourself so that you have your personal successes. And that's all you need to do.
Yeah. It's just about, if you're making something that you enjoy making, you can't go fucking wrong. Like if somebody tells me like, I liked this episode, it made me, it made me feel something nice. I'm always like, oh, fuck, then we're succeeding. Good. That episode was good, and moving forward, we'll keep that in mind, how like this kind of material can connect to people, on a personal level. And I'm like, that good, mission accomplished. Like as soon as people are like, oh man, it made my commute so much better. Like it made me, emotional, or it made me happy. I'm like, oh good, mission accomplished. I feel very good about that. And then like moving forward, you just kind of focus on those things. And, it's you take the small victories when you can get them, and you hang on to them, because, you got to. You don't think of it as like, well, I'm trying to make this my career. So it's just like, well, whatever. That's, you do whatever you want. You see this however you want. But if you're not fucking enjoying it, just stop. Life is too short to be doing that kind of thinking these days.
So let's go into maybe a more linear path with some origin points here. And since we've been talking podcasting, creative work, let's start with that. I kind of see, it's hard because we've again, peeling back the curtain a little bit, we had this conversation a little bit already. So I feel like they kind of coincide, or one leads to the other. So let's start with your role-playing game origin, because I feel like that is what leads into the podcasting for you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role-playing game origin is I got invited. I hung out with Jeff in high school a lot, and then in college, I knew Jeff. I knew Jeff played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and just like, that was the game back then. I'm pretty sure that everybody played. Like Jeff used to wear his #1 Dungeon Master t-shirt. It's a very good t-shirt. And I didn't know anything about it because, it was just kind of harder to find information about what it really was. It was just something that like, you knew nerds played it, but it was like a different kind of nerd at the time. It was like, oh, well, I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons nerd. I like video games. And it was like two different things. So Jeff eventually invited me to play Dungeons and Dragons when we were like in college, because all of our mutual friends had been playing this, and I had no fucking idea. Everyone's like, oh yeah, we used to do that from time to time. Jeff would DM and we would play D&D, and we had these characters. Here's the stories Jeff took us on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this phenomenon. I got to get on this train. And so Jeff led me by the hand through the dark world of, Dungeons and Dragons. And I started playing, and I fell in love with the kind of freedom that it gives you. And that is something I hooked on to greatly, because it's kind of like it can become your video game fan fiction come to life. If you decide to play that way. And that was very appealing to me as a young
Yes.
nerd.
It's one of those things where I don't play it too often, like actual tabletop. I don't really play video games all that often anymore either. But it's something where like it's just a nice place to escape for a night. You don't have to
Yep.
deal with the BS that's going on in the real world, and you can just kind of deal with the BS that's going in the fake world. And especially when you're playing with a group of friends that everyone knows each other really well. That BS is usually just comedy BS that you're creating for the fiction versus like any kind of you're not going to really unless you're playing with strangers, you're not going to come across like the crossing any kind of lines or veils or anything like that.
Like yes.
It's just a fun, safe space, I think, to let your nerd out, because everyone has that nerd in them. I don't care who you are, how much football you watch. You are so, because at that point you're a football nerd. Like that's. Will Wheaton has this incredible video that I'll have to find the link for and put it in the show notes, where he is at a con and doing a Q&A, and some little girl asked this question of like, what do I do when like people call me a geek or a nerd or something along those lines? And it's like a 5-minute like spiel that Will Wheaton goes on that like almost brought me to tears. Like I wish Will Wheaton was my dad when I was a kid. And like basically is telling the girl like, don't mind them, because you know what, they are, whatever you love and you're passionate about, that's what you're a nerd. You're a nerd about that. Like they really love football, and they really loved all those numbers in football and what those stats mean, and they're a football nerd. So like, don't pay any attention to them. Like, don't let them control you be you and do the things that you love, and you'll just be a good person. It's an incredible video that I'm not doing any justice trying to sum up.
No, but it makes a lot of sense that like I've my melding of like in my life having like this theater, went to theater school and stuff like that, and that melding with like nerd stuff, you learn a lot about like the reality of things. And where it's like, why aren't theater actors paid the same as TV actors or movie actors? And it's like, well, they're not as commercially viable. And, like if, an actor in Wicked on Broadway would get paid $20 million, unfortunately, if 40,000 people showed up live to watch it every week. You know what I mean? And like that passion and it's an unfortunate reality of like certain things just aren't as commercially viable as others. And so like being a football nerd and all that stuff, football is cool in the world we live in. It's like, it's normalized. Whereas like the things that we call nerdy or like eccentric are creative, because, unfortunately the world we live in is like things that are imaginative and artistic are, considered like secondary compared to things that are profitable, like watching football and stuff like that. So it is this shitty, but that is kind of on a shift right now, where Game of Thrones is literally the most popular show on like the fucking planet.
I almost feel like I like to be a person who loves fantasy or superheroes or comic books or video games. Like it's actually, I think, the perfect time to like be alive, because I don't think, and I don't know, I'm not in high school, so I can't speak for the high schoolers, but I feel like you get shit on less for that stuff now than you did when we were in high school. I don't know. I'm assuming because it seems so popular, or maybe it's because I just
And I understand the assumption completely. Like it makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, also it's the internet. Like let's be real. Like it's easy to reach out and meet people with similar interests. Like you don't have to go to the D&D club anymore. Like Jeff is the only person I knew who actively was like, I play a game called Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's literally one fucking person. Like the fact that is a reality I live, not that it's like some kind of dark fucking timeline, but I mean, like, I truly didn't even know what the fuck it was. I couldn't even look anything up about it. I was like, I know it, you heard about it, some tabletop thing. So like the fact that it is a great time to quote, be a nerd. And like, because if you have this hobby that is, or this interest in being anything like creative or not sports or whatever is like, they're putting on like fucking Fox, ABC, CBS, if you have an interest in things that are outside of that realm of like commercial viability and what's on TV pretty much, because TV used to be the only way you got information. And so now with the internet, it's like the world opens up to you in a way that like you can just learn about these things and you can go, I remember being like, I like this thing called Japanimation because on fucking channel 11 at 7 a.m., that's what they were calling Dragon Ball Z. And that's the only way I knew. But when other people were like, what the fuck? It's called anime, you idiot. And like how you get it is go to West Coast Video and in the back you rent all the VHS tapes. But now it's like the information that you have, and you can see that like there's communities that build up. It's just like, through the course of time and GeoCities or whatever they were called, those fucking websites, it's just easier to find people with like interests, and you can learn about an interest and learn that you might not like it after all, or that you are like deeply passionate about things. It's just so much easier to fucking learn that like it is a great time to be a nerd. Like if I want to learn about fucking, like I didn't read a lot of comic books as a kid. My brother was like the biggest comic books nerd, whereas I like the universe and I like the powers and I like the characters. So now most of my references, I just scroll through like the wikis that people work on and I learn about all that kind of stuff that way. It's the only way I've learned most of like I have a fucking well of knowledge of like the Marvel universe. It ain't through reading comics, and that's okay. People might shit on me for that, but I'm like, I still know it. Yeah. I still like it. But it's a great time to be alive that I can just go, I want to learn about this today. Or I can watch a fucking YouTube video of someone explaining it to me. Like, that's dope. It is so, like, the fact that we have fucking podcasts. We're on a commute. I learned from the fucking Stop Hack and Roll guys about Powered by the Apocalypse tabletop games. I'm like, how the fuck would I have ever learned this? Besides ordering a book or going to my game store, which has value. Those are wonderful resources. And like asking. But now I can just like, I learned on the train how Powered by the Apocalypse games work. Like that's, what, are you kidding me? What are the fucking Jetsons? And that's why it's so, but bringing it back to like all my fantasy children, like that's why I've been, so adamant working with Jeff about like, we have the potential to make a show that like makes people feel good and, have this image of a character that is uniquely theirs. It's that wonderful feeling that you get when you read a book where you're like, oh, that's my version of Roland Deschain from the Dark Tower. Like, I always love these conversations talking about Stephen King's Dark Tower being like, what does your Roland look like? And everybody always has like, they describe him as this, but I always saw him as this. And I always saw Eddie as this and that. I was like, what if we could kind of capture that feeling, by being as vague as humanly possible? Like, we will never talk about what people fucking look like. We used to, and it was like, meh. And now it's like, what if you can capture that joy of being like, all we know is that they use these pronouns. Everything else is completely up to you and how you want to interpret this character, and who they are will mean something different to so many different people. And it's because we have this audio medium that it's like having it's like a radio drama of back in the day. And it's so cool that you can just beam it to your fucking phone and have someone be like, I drove to work and listened to the story of Eliza and Callahan, and it fucking moved me. And you're like, that is for me, like, that's where I go when people say like, well, no one listens to my podcast. I'm like, do you know how much power you have? To be like, you can reach out and touch even 3 people, and have them say like, I was brought to tears by your fucking interview show or your audio drama show, your tabletop show. It taught me something I did not know. That is fucking juice. That is power. That is, it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 people. If you met someone in person who was like, what you did moved me, you would feel incredible. And it's something to really grasp onto in this age of feeling small in an ocean of success. It's something you can really sink your teeth into. And people say, I gave you an hour of my time and I was deeply affected by you. Thank you. It's like you should feel warm and fuzzy.
It's something that I would very recently I started trying to remember in every outro that I do, like to thank people for like, hey, if you're still listening and whatnot, like thank you for sticking with us and listening for an hour or an hour and a half, however long the episode is. And like, because I know everyone's time, especially in 2019, when you literally could be doing anything, whether it's streaming, whether it's, content creation, content consumption, whatever it is, there's so many options out there in 2019. And like anyone that takes the time to like sit down and listen to my dopey show, like thanks, like thank you for listening, because hopefully you got something out of it, and or whatever, even if it's just, hey, I like hearing your voice for an hour, then great. Like this, like I'm very appreciative of anyone that listens to this show, because it's not like I'm doing anything different than the other interview shows. I'm just doing it with my voice, right?
But you are, because
Right.
it's yours. But
Right.
that's what makes it so different and cool. I can't hammer that home enough, that like it is so, what you're doing is so
Right.
much different because it's you, and you bring this fucking Philly, South Jersey flavor. I don't know if you're from South Jersey. Are you from South Jersey?
No, I'm born and raised in Bucks County.
Oh, okay. But
Right.
it's that same flavor, that element of living where like about hoagies pre 2007.
Yes.
So the Wawa expansion. So like it's that attitude and that like feel that makes it so unique, and it's like something
Right.
that's so fucking cool. Is what makes podcasts so cool, is that it's people's worldviews, and you can kind of get a peek into who this person is, no matter what they're fucking doing.
It's one of the things, and this is definitely pre 2007. Is I used to travel for work, and I went up north for like the first time ever, like to like the Boston area for an install, and we were doing an install at a hoagie shop, and they're like, we'll give you a sandwich on the house. What kind of sub do you want? I'm like, a what?
You want to hand me a military vehicle?
And I was like, oh, a sandwich. I'll have a turkey hoagie. And they're like, wait, what's a hoagie? I'm like, okay. I think it's a sandwich. It's a sub, but we call it hoagies in Philly. It is always still, even in like 2019, kind of fascinating to travel outside of the Philadelphia, South Jersey area, because they still don't know like what like a hoagie, like some places still just don't know what a hoagie is. And so my favorite is one of my favorite being from Philly, the Philly area stories, is going up to like Long Island, New York, at a restaurant and asking for a cheesesteak, and like they gave me like kind of one of those rock eyebrow what are you talking about kind of things, and they said okay, and they brought me like a literal T-bone steak with cheese on it on a hoagie roll.
Nice.
And I was
I'll
like,
take it, but this ain't it.
I was like, I'll eat this, but like I was thinking maybe like minute steak, like it is just so fascinating experiencing other people's culture, or like putting your culture into other people's laps, and like them saying, oh, okay. and I do like it is, I love that, All My Fantasy Children does do that, even for me every now and then, because being, for the most part in the same area, same general area.
Yeah, same general area.
I had no idea what Boost was until when you guys first dropped it a couple episodes ago in my timeline. I was like, Boost, isn't it like a protein shake? And then like and then you guys started talking, like, oh, this is something that's like very, very like Mount Holly, I guess, specific.
The most regional drink. It's made in Riverside, New Jersey. Like there's a bottling plant, and like it's only in convenience stores, like locally owned ones in South fucking Jersey. It is like so specific that like I literally, you're saying this, we're probably recording this evening, I'm like, I gotta talk about Boost again.
I can't even think of like something that's in this area. Like I guess maybe some beers and like Neshaminy Creek, but even that goes beyond.
But even Neshaminy Creek sounds like the most fantasy town. I kind of want to use it. I'm like,
Yeah.
Neshaminy Creek? Excuse me? Can we stop for a second and be like, that's the most fucking Hobbit shit I have ever heard in my life?
Oh my god! If you could pull, I think all their named beers you could probably pull for like inspiration of locations or characters from for all my fantasy children.
I'm about it.
Okay. So I let's end on this. I think we kind of are at the same point where we were last time, where I'm gonna have to have you back on to talk more about theater and acting and that kind of lifestyle that you also have that we didn't really touch on much.
Okay.
But something that we touched on a little bit before that I want to re-talk about and bring back to the table is Final Fantasy, because that's something that you have a deep love for. I had a deep love for when I was younger. I fell out of it when I had I just don't play. I'm actually on a quest to play every single Final Fantasy again.
Love that.
And I'm currently in the middle of 5 on my Game Boy Advance. But
Nice.
yeah, so Final Fantasy I think is like that, if I remember correctly, is like your like real like first exposure to what a role playing video game was, correct?
It was Shining Force 2.
Shining Force, that's right. That's
Shining
right.
Force 2, but
Also good.
Final Fantasy was the first like the story. The Shining Force taught me like fantasy tropes. Like it's about two jewels were stolen by some common thief, and then a demon was released, and that kind of narrative where and the only way to stop him is by a hero appears and who can wield the magic sword, like that kind of thing. And that blew my fucking mind, because how good is that? That's so good, and it's so classic and amazing. But then Final Fantasy VI kind of showed me like that JRPG character-driven narrative where everyone has a backstory, and like people aren't just like stock characters. Some are, but for the most part, everybody has like a point of view about why they're on the journey. And that was when I was like, oh, this is deep. This is way more than just like, the local shopkeep joined your party. Why? I don't know. They had an extra sprite, and they wanted to include it in the final development. It was like, this character is the king of this nation, and they've been wronged by the villain, and they want to join you. I'm like, my God, this is awesome. And I was like fucking 11. So, for me, it blew my ass out of the water. And it was a big part of me developing and becoming like a young adult, was these imaginative fantasy, like escaping the shitty drudgery of being an adolescent and a teen by escaping into these cool narratives of people a little older than me that were doing really amazing, heroic shit.
Yeah. Very specifically Final Fantasy. I have a big place in my heart for Final Fantasy 4 as well. And I think that was strengthened by the fact that they released 4 after years. And because I'm a like you, I love universes, I love continuity, I love that kind of stuff. So Final Fantasy 4, like for a long, I guess until Final Fantasy 6-3 at the time for us, but until that came out, like I really loved like the story of Cain I loved the story of Cain as well. Cecil is who I was meaning to say, but I was thinking of Cain.
Hey, kill Cain is some real shit. Kill Cain.
but Cecil or Cecil, however you want to say his name, and Cain, they were like my boys, and they were like and then Final Fantasy 6 came along, and it was, now I can't really speak of any other Final Fantasy beyond 6, because I've never finished 7, and I've only really dipped my toes in like 8 and 9 and maybe 10. I own a lot. I probably own all of them, because I usually buy them when they're on clearance or whatever, because I'm going to play them one day. Don't let the fact that I haven't played them yet, Aaron, fool you. I will play them.
Yeah. Hey, but like you gotta get in there.
Yeah.
And it's not like I am so deep down this well of like enjoying Final Fantasy that I know that a lot of it is bullshit. And I know the imperfections, because I've been like, I've replayed all my favorites at least like 4 or 5 times. Nice. So like I know that they're not perfect, and that they've aged poorly, and that like there's a lot of translation errors and stuff, and it make them like in 2019, a lot of them are like, oh my fucking God. But like far and away, like you will have such a good time, and being like, you'll experience media and you'll be like, oh my God, they totally lifted that from a game from 1995.
Yeah.
Because Final Fantasy VII has such a place in everybody's creative internet age hearts of being like, it was the one and like 8 that were kind of like pre-internet.
Right.
And so everybody like could project completely on these teenage and 20 something characters.
There is a huge generation of I'm going to say the word kids, but they're not much younger than me. That like that's their Final Fantasy is like 7 and 8, I guess. And like for me it's 6. Like and maybe it's because I never went beyond 6, but like I have
and it also it's very generational. Like I know that I'm turning 32 in August.
Okay.
So I know that when 7 came out, I was fucking 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know, like so like getting a 10-year-old, they're fact on like the first 3D graphics, like I'm gonna lose my fucking mind.
Right. And,
you know,
and like I probably lost my mind. It's like, oh, this is great. It's like 3D. It's at the time realistic, which is kind of funny. Like when you look back at the Final Fantasy 7 graphics, but it was like, oh, this is realistic. This is great. And one of the problems was that like one of my discs was damaged, so like I never like I never was able to finish it. That's why like I'm actually at this point I think just waiting out the re-release so that I can play it. But I am on the journey. I'm on Final Fantasy 5, which is kind of bad. But Final Fantasy like 6, I can't wait to replay that one because it is for me. And you're right, it is very like it's amazing how small that generational difference is. 3 years of like where 6 is my like. And I do love that the old school like 16-bit graphics.
Oh, sprites are the truth. Like Chrono Trigger is deep place in my heart.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think is that on the Super Nintendo Mini? I think that is on the Super Nintendo Mini. I know 6 is. I don't know.
It's also on it's on 3DS if you have one of those.
Yeah, so I have to play. I have not played Chrono Trigger in. Probably since I have it on my SNES cartridge still. So I mean,
just sitting in a box with a lock on it.
One of the greatest gifts I got from a friend. He went to Japan. Like he lost a bunch. He was diagnosed with diabetes years ago. So like lost a bunch of weight to like cure himself of diabetes, and then went like his reward was to go to Japan. Like he loves like that anime culture. He loves those like just Japanese role-playing games.
Oh, totally. I was just there in December living this fantasy. It was great.
You went to Japan. How is it? Yeah. Is it great? Because I've never been.
It's a magical journey. I mean, it's clean. There's very little street crime. You'll have an amazing time. The culture is wonderful. If you want to go for just like a nerd adventure, that's totally possible and like, you know, fun to do. That's completely what I did. Like I went around buying merch, seeing some sites and like exploring the city of Tokyo, but like make no mistake, I went to the Square Enix cafe that's like at their office headquarters and like had Final Fantasy themed cocktails and desserts.
Oh, I want to go just for that. Like,
it's great.
And also to go see, I guess, Nintendo and like check out that. But like as much as I love Nintendo, it purely rests on the shoulders of Final Fantasy 6 is like I will never not love Square and Square Enix and you know, like they are forever like they'll never, I mean I guess they could do wrong, and I'm actually interested to go back and play 6 because like hearing you talk about how they've aged, like I wonder like has that game changed in the 20 years since I played it? Or
there is no doubt that it will. There is no doubt because, like, you know, the cliches it's ripe with like anime tropes and stuff, and you kind of like can laugh at them instead of being like, you know, the first time I experienced Final Fantasy VIII's protagonist Squall is like the broody tsundere, like, you know, dark protagonist who like doesn't talk, like I don't care about anything. And then like back then I was like, oh my God, this character's so deep. Meanwhile, like that's like the biggest fucking trope in every anime ever, but I had never experienced it before. So it was so magical to me. But like, so you experience these things as an adult and you still get that joy of like, oh my God, how ridiculous. But also like, but I still have a lot of deep feels for this.
Yeah, that was like, I think because I don't think 4 did it. It was the first one where in the battle system you could have like 2 people playing and like you control half the party, your friend controls the other half. And like, there was like every day in the summer that it came out, probably, that me and one of my good friends, we sat down and we played that game every day. We got all the characters. We got our party to level 99, and we went on to face Kefka, at his final whatever. And like just like being able to do it, like getting angry at one of the computer players that hit me and almost killed Locke, and I was like, and then I attacked them and killed my own party because I was angry, and I said, we're not going to replace that character, they're going to lay there the whole time and we're going to beat this boss with just 3. And that's like such a fun dopey memory of mine of that game. And like my friend that went to Japan, he got me I guess it's the Famicom or the Super Famicom version. He got me that version of Final Fantasy VI that I have in a box it's in my shed right now. It's going to eventually go on a shelf in my shed once I repurpose it into my man cave or whatever you want to call it. Man cave sounds, you know what? I want to edit that out. that sounds, I don't know why. I've never said the word man cave in my life.
Hey, it's okay.
it's your
sanctuary. It's your fucking. It's your sanctuary.
My shedio is what I like to call it.
Shedio.
That's what I've always called it. I don't know why Man Cave came out. That was real weird. But that's like I can't wait to put it on a nice shelf. Like I'm gonna have such a weird like eccentric collection of like wrestling and like video game and podcasting. Like I can't wait to have that done. But that's where it's gonna go. It's gonna go to a shelf out there because like I don't think I opened it, and it's never gonna be opened if I didn't. Because it's just like it has no. I mean, maybe it has an actual value, but it has like immense personal value and sentimental value to me.
I bought a Japanese copy of Final Fantasy VIII. It's literally, I'm looking at it right now. It sits on my Final Fantasy shrine shelf of my desk. It's never gonna get opened or played. Right. But it means so much to me to like go to the country that made this thing that is such an impact on my life and just kind of like enjoy it. It brings me joy.
That series in particular is the series that like introduced me to the idea of storytelling and and like is like, while not like this, like I never really cite Final Fantasy and maybe it's giving it a discredit to not, but it is like a reason why like I want to be a creator of some sort, or I want to I want to be a storyteller. I don't like using the word filmmaker or writer or anything, because like I don't know where I'm gonna end up as a storyteller. Like I don't know what medium that's gonna be in. So like storyteller is like the most appropriate title that I like to use.
Makes sense.
And it's that's what gave me like, I think like the like, here's how you structure sometimes a very bad story, and sometimes like in 6 how you structure a good story,
and how you can use like music and to enhance a mood, or like using like it makes me think of like so much of All My Fantasy Children is and how I see it anyway. My half of the pie is old school Final Fantasies where all you have is fucking sprites and some MIDI music, and they like made us feel things. With like very little visual aids, because you couldn't look at those sprites and be like, I know exactly what Terra looks like. Everyone kind of had their own interpretation of like that sprite, but it was cool to kind of like have your own version of these people. But anyway, it was a lesson for me in like how you can have very little and tell a complete story that can affect people. And it's a lot of how I go about like the show of being like, I don't have to put music in this to, we can just, you're enough. That's like kind of idea where it's like, if you have a good idea and it's coming from like a genuine place, people will feel something from it. Because I played Chrono Trigger and I remember being like, oh my God, I'm so emotionally invested in like a couple pixels clumped together.
Yeah. And that's how I felt for Final Fantasy, and still feel about Final Fantasy VI. It's like, it's just this, it's the first, like, I remember, I don't know if it was the year that it came out. It probably wasn't, because I don't know if I understood that you could like write a screenplay or something like that. But by the time I was 16, I definitely, like, me and my best friend were like, we could, like, Final Fantasy VI could be a trilogy. Like, that could be in itself a 3-part movie. And like, it is the one where somewhere, I don't know if it's on my external hard drive, I don't know if it's on an old laptop, it's somewhere, could be even in a notebook somewhere, there is like a definitely an outline, if not a half-written screenplay for like Final Fantasy: The World of Balance or something like that for the first movie, and then an outline for the World of Ruin, and then somehow we came up with the concept for the third movie. I forget what that was exactly,
Love it.
but somewhere that's it. And then like I remember like 10 years ago, I went through like I'm gonna sit down and play through all these Final Fantasies to like create an interconnected universe between all these games, and I want to crack the code and write something to put all these games together so there's one continuous storyline, which I did not get very far with. I was I was not very I didn't have a commitment level for that, but then I did go back and start playing them for fun all the way through, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are just like, wow, I guess this is what you do in 1989 with a game. But I want to end on you know what, there was a note that I was going to end on that I do forget, but I do remember the second part. Last time we spoke, we kind of talked about our favorite characters from Final Fantasy VI. But you know what? I never gave you the opportunity to tell me what yours was. So mine is Locke and Shadow, with probably a heavy leaning towards Locke. Who are your favorite characters from Final Fantasy VI?
Well, okay. So I have a lot of feelings about this because it is like picking telling your child or pet that you have a favorite. For me, I have right now I have like a wall of, it's a cork board with all the keychains and like lanyards basically that I bought of Final Fantasy characters in Tokyo. I really like Terra a lot because I've always liked that story trope of like, I always like the character that, has like this inner sadness and is trying to overcome that. Because there's always something so real about that in real life where like sometimes you're surrounded by like peppy people who are like, you can do it. And you're like, but I'm just so fucking tired, Yeah. And I think of that in Terra and Celis, or Celis, God only knows.
Right.
I like those two a lot. And I always like the gambler character. So Setzer is one that I've always.
Setzer's right. Yeah,
Setzer's very cool. And like the character designs are just so classic Amano back then.
Yeah.
Like they're so just, they're so like fully dimensioned, like so fully realized. But yeah, I think Terra is probably my favorite character just because that level of, this is like such like when you replay it, the text is very simple. Like the translation is very not good. And so like Terra's dialogue is like weak. It's not good. But it would always make me think of like, what if Terra had more to say, this is probably what she would say. And it's that kind of like tired character, but in the face of all this still gets up and keeps fighting Kefka. Like after all the horrible things that he's done in the Empire, still keeps going. It was very like super sad, superhero-esque, and I loved that about her.
Right. For Locke, I just really love I love that treasure hunter kind of character. Very like, and especially around when Final Fantasy VI came out, I was probably like deep into my like, I'm gonna watch Indiana Jones all the time, and I was, that was a character that I really like. I loved the Indiana Jones game on the computer. That was, I think it was The Last Crusade, where it's just like typical Sierra, it's storytelling, click and tell story game, whatever. And like that, and the him being a treasure hunter, reminded me of Indiana Jones. I was like, I love this. Like that's my jam. And I was a big like Locke and Celeste shipper. Like I say that now because like I've always said I'm not a shipper, but like I guess I was. I just did it with video game characters because like I very much wanted those two to get together, and like I don't know if that's ever a thing. I don't know if that's ever addressed. I'm going to find out in my replay, that's for sure. Because I totally want it. Like I want that. That's my shipping for right now. But you, so 7 and 8, it sounds like are your actual, like you put them ahead of 6 a little bit.
Yes, for me, because of when I played them, especially, I was like 10, 12, 13. Right. But I know my 15 is my favorite of all time. That's a controversial topic because it's new. Right. But it's about it's about a prince who travels with his friends on a mission to save the world. And
Right.
so it's kind of like they say it's about a road trip, but it's about being 20 and turning 30 and kind of owning up to responsibility. And that one hit home. Oof. It was a rough
Oh,
one of like, sometimes you just can't hang out with your friends anymore type things. You have to like, you
that,
got to do hero shit. And that is not fun, but you really just want to hang with your boys. And so that
that
one, like it broke me, man. It was a rough one.
now,
15 is some heavy shit. I recommend that so much because it's really beautiful and it's new, but it
right.
is about like a prince with his crown's guard, who are like his, his guardians and mentors, on a trip to save the world on a mission, but no one wants to take it. They all just
Right.
want to like stay hanging out in their city eating and stuff, but they have to do this terrible hero business. And it's
That
about like growing up. It's
oh,
terrible.
that that sounds amazing. Like I know I don't have to play them all in order, but like I just want to I want to take a week off from work and just play, not sleep, drink all the coffee, and play through every single Final Fantasy to get to that moment.
It's a good moment.
That sounds like right up my alley as far as
Mhm.
like because I don't know if it's me getting older or if it's me having kids, but like I'm way more emotional now than I was 10 years ago.
Of
And
course.
like I mean I when it's my fiance was pregnant with our son, my first kid, in 2012 when the Muppet movie came out, and we went to go see it, and we're sitting there, and at the end, I don't know if you've ever seen the Muppet movie with Jason Segel.
I have not.
But it is it is a wonderful movie. I enjoy, it's a good movie just to sit there. I watched it with my son. He likes it. Him and my fiance, his mom, bust my balls all the time because very specifically there's a moment at the end where Kermit has a monologue about like friendship and stuff, basically, and like I was brought to tears in the movie theater at the Muppet movie, and and I get judged a lot by both, in a fun way, by my fiance, and now my son busts my balls about it too, so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, so to play like an emotional Final Fantasy, which I'm sure, you know what, now that I think, like, if I go back to even 6, I'm sure that would probably bring some emotions out of me.
Oh yeah, no, it's
Right.
it's hard. It's hard to do those, especially ones that were special to you as a kid,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you
yeah.
as an adult, you think about like where you were at and like why this affected you, and then you go on some deep soul searching and it's fucking rough. And then you
Right.
play the new one as an adult and it's about becoming an adult and you're like,
Oh
fuck,
my
what?
All right. Well, I guess I know what I have in store for me for the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's a fucking journey because I replay 8 and 7 every 2 or 3 years, and 10 because those are
Right.
like my favorites.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
then going back to them at different ages, you'll definitely find new fun things.
All right. Well, Aaron, it's been a pleasure talking to you for the last hour and 20 minutes or so. Before I let you go, know this, super friends, we will have Aaron back on to chat about even more stuff that he does. We
Yeah.
scratched the surface with basically a very role-playing / podcast heavy episode.
Which is all right. That's kind of what
Oh,
I'm
God.
known for on the internet anyway.
Well, yeah. But there's another side of Aaron that we'll get to. I promise you that.
It's true.
So Aaron, before we let you go though, get out your plugs.
You can find me at Catano-Saez on Twitter, all one word. You can find All My Fantasy Children at AMFC_podcast and allmyfantasychildren.com. Listen to it. It's a lot of fun. We start out with a different concept than we ended with, and it's experienced the growth of our show. It's a great time. You don't have to like tabletop to enjoy it. And it's pretty much it. Back me on Patreon at patreon.com/Catano-Saez and help me make more cool shit if you like my kind of worldview and how I believe in creating things. Yeah, do that.
And I give it the super friend seal of approval. All My Fantasy Children is something that I have been like binging for the better part of like the last month or so. I was late to the game to hop on, simply because there's so much out there.
Yeah.
And even after talking to Jeff about it, I was like, oh man, this is very much my jam. And it's just something that gets put in my back pocket. And then it's like, hey, like I forgot this thing was a thing. And then it's definitely, if you're out there feeling sad about something and you just need to laugh for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, All My Fantasy Children is like my recommended medicine. I think right now is
Awesome.
it's the show that I very easily see as like, oh man, I'm sad and depressed. I just want to hear two friends laugh and come up with some serious, sometimes serious, sometimes silly, somewhere in between, sometimes both, sometimes all, like everything that you want. I think in a conversation between two friends and creating characters, it's there. It's in All My Fantasy Children, and I highly recommend that. And certainly, I mean, let's get more people like back your favorite creators. Like that's something that's kind of been like on the forefront of my mind lately. There was, I don't know. I think you sent a tweet out about it, but like definitely like the a couple weeks ago when something pretty big in the tabletop world happened, there was like a lot of like independent creators saying, yes, that's great. That is great. I'm happy that this is happening because it helps the industry and everything. But like also remember that there's like these independent creators who also need your support.
And like who is stuff people actively consume, that's the thing. It's all about like if you consume a thing that you enjoy and you have the means, everybody sees Marvel movies and we all love Marvel, but like, there's way smaller people who need your help to kind of not become Marvel, but to fucking live and keep making shit. Marvel ain't going anywhere. Some people might.
Right, exactly. And like if you're enjoying something like All My Fantasy Children or like Party of One podcast or like Everything Is Awesome, if you're or anything like Jimmy watches Star Wars every minute, like whatever your thing is, that you watch or listen to or whatever on a regular basis, like if you, I think some people have this thing was like, oh, I don't want to give $1 because that seems cheap, but like it's not.
Nah,
like everything is so, because that is $12 a year. That $12 a year that pays for like a month's worth of hosting for most people or for a lot of people. So like that, if one person does that, if 12 people do that, that's like, wow, that's a whole cost like an independent creator doesn't have to worry about because 12 people are supporting them $1 a month. I don't have to worry about hosting fees anymore. So like it all adds up. So it's something that's like been really on the forefront of my mind lately is like supporting independent artists. And that's just a long-winded way of saying go to Aaron's Patreon and support him there if you can. Share it if you can't. That's also
that
important.
especially is huge.
Yeah, like it's just word of mouth. And if you can do it, great. If you can skip like one coffee a day or a month or whatever, then great, you can support Aaron. If not, like if you just, even if it's not about skipping coffee, you literally just don't have the money, that's fine. Like I know I think I can speak for Aaron. And when I say we get it, like times are tough for people. Like you need to worry about yourself first and foremost, but like just sharing that Patreon, sharing All My Fantasy Children, telling people to listen to All My Fantasy Children, telling people to check out Aaron's Twitter feed or his Patreon or whatever, like all that helps because it flows. It's just the way that trickle down effect works.
You ain't wrong.
Do that for Aaron. Do that for all your favorite creators. And I guess we'll end on that note. Aaron, thank you so much for being on Everything Is Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Once again, a huge thank you to Aaron Catano-Saez for coming on the show. As you heard, we wanted to bring him back on, and then I had my mental breakdown, and we didn't even air his episode until 2023. With that said, I really enjoyed this conversation. Aaron is an infectious person of positivity. His positivity leaks through, I think, this episode, and it definitely leaks through All My Fantasy Children, his Twitter feed, and anywhere you get to hear or see his work. The positivity he emits is it's super infectious. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and I do want to get him back on the show. So that will be something that we hope to do in this new season of Everything Is Awesome before we hit our summer break of 2024. Maybe even before we hit our winter break of 2023 here. With that said, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode. It was such a fun episode. Like I said, Make sure you check the show notes to see where you can find Aaron, All My Fantasy Children, and anything else related to what we've talked about. Make sure you do your due diligence and hit up make5calls.org, or maybe it's make5calls.org, or just Google Make 5 Calls. And there's an app that you can download on your phone that makes everything super easy. But call your local representatives about things that matter to you. Women's rights are on the line each and every day. The rights of the queer community are on the line every single day. So make your voices heard through 5calls.org. I think that's actually the website. And stay awesome.